Welcome to the Events Podcast. I'm your host, Dan Taylor, and each week I talk with event professionals and entrepreneurs about how they plan, promote, and run their events. We help you build your events empire by growing your business using live events, whether you're running community meetups or conferences, trade shows, and other events. We focus on finding actionable tips that you can use straight away. We want you to get more attendees, produce epic events, make more money, and most importantly, to do it all with no stress. This podcast is sponsored by EventsFrame. Check it out over at eventsframe.com. Make the switch from Eventbrite today to our amazing ticketing and registration system with no ticket fees. Most ticketing systems charge you a minimum of 3% of the ticket price, but we just have a flat, low fee with no ticket fees and no restrictions. There's literally no system out there that is cheaper than EventsFrame. It's also super easy to use, and you can embed your tickets in your website, or you can use our own website builder, which is really simple. We have amazing options to apply all kinds of discounts and all the features you'd expect from a much more expensive system like QR code check-in. Go to eventsframe.com, that's eventsframe.com, for a free, no-risk, 1-month trial. Hello and welcome to the Events Podcast. Today I'm delighted to have a returning guest, Robb from Bali. Chris is a veteran of the mass participation sporting industry, and we had another interview about a year ago you should go and check out. It's really good. We talked about Chris's background growing up in Zimbabwe and how he worked in the Sydney Olympics and founded Singapore Marathon. And then what it kind of ended up with him founding and running an event called Mass Participation Asia, which has been renamed Mass Participation World, all for people running these large-scale sporting events. So great to have Chris back. And in this episode, we're going to get into his conference. So Chris, welcome back.
Hi, Dan. Great to connect again. Thanks for the opportunity to chat. Had a wonderful chat last time and really looking forward to this. Yeah.
What's new with you, Chris? Like you're in Bali. Anything changed in your life? You still living in Bali, traveling, speaking, running this event?
Yeah, so still based out of Bali, traveling a reasonable amount. Although I've just had a nice 6-week period at home, which I've loved. It's a beautiful time of year here. Been getting out as we were talking before we came on air on riding the bike through the rice fields. It's a really beautiful time of year here. Neck of the woods up to Prague for the European Business of Running conference, and then on to Manchester after that for a conference as well around crowd science. One of the speakers, in fact, Marcel Altenberg, who's a crowd scientist who was at our conference last year in Singapore. So the conference really started in 2015 under the banner of Mass Participation Asia, with the primary objective of bringing the industry together across all of the verticals, so the traditional verticals, as I call them, so running, cycling, triathlon, obstacle racing, swimming, and the like. And it's grown to, I think last year we reached a little bit of a tipping point. We had about 60 speakers from all over the world and nearly 250 delegates. And really got some great feedback from the people that had attended. And what we've now literally 4 weeks ago is we've rebranded Mass Participation Asia into Mass Participation World. With that comes an exciting partnership with a guy called Mike Laughlin out of London. So Mike was the founder and former CEO of a wonderful organization called SportCal. Mike's got a 30-year background in research in the industry. And one of the things we've recognized is that there's very little research in the mass participation industry globally. So the kind of model that we're embarking on is working across 4 different pillars. So building the conferences out into a global network of conferences. So next year we will have a European conference out of London. There's a good chance we'll have a conference out of India. And then the ultimate objective over the next few years is to have North America, South America, Africa, Middle East with these conferences that bring the industry together on an annual basis. And then the research vertical, consulting and advising, and then the education part of it as well. So looking at ways that I do a number. I'm in the midst of a masterclass at the moment. I do a number of free webinars, and the idea is really to say, well, how can we support the future leaders in our industry and the future people that are not even necessarily the leaders, but people that are going to be working in the industry. There's a bunch of formal education on around sport, but generally it's a Bachelor of Science or it's a Bachelor of Sports Management, which tends to focus more on your traditional mainstream stadium sports and professional sports. And I think with the growing space of mass participation, particularly in Asia, there's opportunities to hopefully provide a platform to educate people more.
Yeah. Well, I want to start at the beginning and go through the story of the conference. But I think first, just come back to something you mentioned. It's interesting about building this global network of conferences. It's something I thought about. But I don't know what you think, but what I've noticed a little bit, the events I've seen who do that, like, for example, BET, in education technology, there's a big event called BET, BTT, and they have their big London event, which is huge, and then they've started running Asia, Middle East, Latin America. But still, the original one is the big one. That's what BET is, and the other ones are like a kind of tiny in comparison. So I don't know if you think and I've seen one or two others where it is easy, you can do that for sure, but to make the other ones comparable to the original is often hard, especially when it's established.
Yeah, look, it's a really great point, and I think we've recognised that, and the positioning is that the Singapore event will be the world event for the foreseeable future. We've got a great relationship with the Singapore government, who are very supportive of the event. We're expanding it from a 2-day event to a 3-day event this year, for example. We're adding industry awards to it. We had a small expo last year, and we expect that to grow this year. We expect significant growth in the number of delegates, and we certainly the anecdotal feedback. We just opened registrations just over a week ago, but we're getting groups. I was on a call with someone yesterday who didn't even attend last year, but is talking of bringing 6 to 10 of their staff to the event, and we're getting more and more of those stories of people saying, "Well, the feedback that we've had last year was huge." So, we've built that foundation, and I think we would be naive to think we can go into new markets and overnight grow to the scale of where we are, but in Singapore. But the reality is that, the industry doesn't have many of these offerings. But, there's nothing that kind of tackles all of the verticals like we do. You have Running USA, which is fantastically successful, and they have 600-700 delegates at it. There's Triathlon Business International, but they all tend to focus on the one vertical. And where I was coming from is, I think we all have similar opportunities. We have similar challenges. We need to get our funding models right. We need to attract and retain and engage with participants. From a planning perspective, it's very similar. It's getting permits, it's getting all the approvals in place, it's all the risk management that goes with outdoor events, and whether you're putting on a big triathlon or a small triathlon or a big running or small running event, you're fundamentally faced with the same challenges, and the realization for me is, well, why don't we bring everybody into the tent and learn from each other? And one of the things that I also try and do is bring speakers from outside of the traditional mass participation industries to say, well, what can we learn from other sports? What can we learn from other industries? So we've had the likes of One Championships, which is the Asian version of UFC for those that follow mixed martial arts. We've had Tennis Australia and a case study on the Australian Open and various others, with a view to say, well, let's not be inwardly focused. Let's look over the fence and see what we can learn from others. And even to the extent of, people say to me regularly, well, how do you define mass participation? And until probably 2 years ago, I would have defined it as those traditional verticals, which I spoke about earlier: running, cycling, triathlon, swimming, obstacle. But the reality is that, people who run massive football tournaments, how can you not say that's mass participation? I presented the Sports Industry Asia Awards in Bangkok for a 3-on-3 basketball tournament in China that had 64,000 participants. That's clearly mass participation. So how can we all learn from each other and benefit each other and get governments to recognize the value that these kind of sports bring to their citizens, not only from an economic impact, but from a social and a health benefit?
Definitely. Now, I want to start in the beginning of the event, because a lot of people listen to this are kind of, running their own conference or want to start running a conference. They want to do it. How can you, being basic about how can you run a conference and actually make money out of it, and make a profit out of it? So I want to get back. How did the conference start? And how did you come up with the idea? How did you promote it? I guess, you had an audience, which is a really huge thing for getting started. But how did you actually get started and get the first event off the ground?
Yeah, look, it was that idea that nothing like this exists. There's an opportunity to promote collaboration, and hopefully that leads to best practice within the industry. the realization that it was growing in Asia. Yeah, so I guess funding is key. So we approached the Singapore government and a couple of sponsors to help support the event. I think the reality, like most properties in the events industry, it's a model of you invest in year one, you maybe break even, make a little bit in year two, and then things start to escalate from there. And certainly that's been the model for us. So we invested year one, invested year two. We had a difficult situation in year two. We were approached by someone to bring the conference to Bangkok. We took the conference to Bangkok. It was supposed to be in November 2016, and then the king died. Everything shut down, and we literally had to postpone it from December to May. So that had a financial impact, but it had some great opportunities in that in the second year, a number of people found their way to us in May who hadn't found their way to us in December. So we ended up with a partnership with Running USA, which has turned out to be fantastic. We conducted
Could I just
the first Asian runner survey with them last year.
Yeah, just to say about the funding, because that's interesting, because a lot of people don't, run events, they don't get funding, they just do ticket sales. So how did that work? You actually got some money from the Singapore government to run the event?
Yeah, not a massive amount of money. So we got a small grant from them that was linked to a bunch of KPIs that we had to achieve.
Right.
We got a little bit of sponsorship. Most of it was in kind. And then the ticket sales, and we put the event alongside the Singapore Marathon, and that was great because it gave people a reason to come into town. And in those days, I was still organizing the Singapore Marathon, so 2015 was a pretty huge year for it because I did my book launch on the Wednesday night. The conference kicked off on Thursday and Friday, and then we organized the marathon sort of Saturday, Sunday. But it presented a number of great opportunities, including the fact that Steve Cram was in town. He was doing the hosting the broadcast for the marathon. So we ended up with Steve doing the opening keynote for the marathon for the conference, which was fantastic. Got some interest. As is typical in the early years of these things, we ended up giving away a fair number of complimentary entries to attract people, to get them involved. The key focus was getting the speakers right, so as to have a number of highlights to be able to attract people so that they would buy tickets. So you're right, the financial model crucial, but if you go into it thinking you're going to make money in year one, more than likely you're going to be disappointed. I find in all my years of 35 years experience in the events industry, there's very few events that I've ever worked on that make a profit from year one, and you've got to be in a position where you know that you're kind of building and investing.
How did you sell your tickets for the? I'm really, because this is always it's kind of, people kind of brush over this, but it's actually a really hard thing. Like, how do you get people to pay for an event in year one? Like, were you approaching people on LinkedIn?
It was a lot of.
Okay.
It was a mix. It's LinkedIn. It's WhatsApp marketing. So we have a WhatsApp group. We've obviously got a database which we email to, Facebook page. As we've moved on this year, we will be retaining a professional sales company that does sales conference. We've done it in the last couple of years with someone working on a project basis. But the sales part of it is key, and it's a real mix. And I think obviously as you build, you get more and more content. So we do quite a lot of content related marketing. So I'm about to embark on it. We announced our first 8 speakers last week, and I'm about to embark on a series of interviews with those speakers. So I spend literally 10, 15 minutes with each of the speakers. And then we turn that into a little 1.5, 2-minute teaser, which we put out on social media, profiling the speakers, having a little bit of a chat about some of the insights that they might share. So building that awareness and I guess giving people insights and information in the lead up to the conference, rather than just trying to sell them a product, giving them some content ahead of time.
Sure. Just to step in here quickly to mention our sponsor, Events Frame, a project I'm co-founder of, and I want to mention our integrations, which we believe are the best available. Firstly, payment integrations. You can connect any payment gateway such as Stripe, PayPal, on Braintree, or even bank account or take cash. You can connect everything to EventsFrame. We also have the best marketing integrations out there with every email marketing system, including MailChimp, Zapier, Infusionsoft, Aweber, Drip. And we've got deep integrations with all the social media platforms like Facebook, Google, and Twitter. We've got thousands of events live on EventsFrame right now, ranging from small community meetups to huge trade shows and conferences. Check it out over at eventsframe.com. That's eventsframe.com. And now, back to the interview. But now stick to the early events, because that's obviously the one where things really got going. Well, were you like, you said you did some marketing. Did you do the sales yourself? Were you just approaching people, emailing, or did you get people to help you? I'm just really curious how you kind of, because how many tickets did you sell for the first event?
Looking back, I think we had about 120 delegates, Dan. And those were, and I don't have the numbers at my fingertips, but I'm guessing that, probably 60% of those were sold, 40% of them were complimentaries for sponsors and other people that we wanted to come along. And that was literally, hitting the phones. I had a couple of people in the office, myself going to my network, sending, personalized invites and those kind of, it's a lot of legwork. I mean, that's, if that's the kind of key tip that your listeners are looking for, it's very much about, you got to work the phones, you got to work your network. We're really being in regular contact with people, chasing them up, doing deals, bulk deals, encouraging people to, to come along, maybe offering discounts and so on. Yeah. And, it's kind of an interesting one because you got, from that perspective, you got Asia, which is an emerging market. And I think we had, in the first year, we had something like 9 or 10 countries attending. This last year, we had 21 countries. And I think this year, we'll end up with, probably 30, 35 countries represented, and possibly even more. So what I'm saying is, when you go to markets like Cambodia and Vietnam and so on that are emerging, that they're paying the cost not only of a registration, but they're flying into Singapore, they're paying expensive hotel rates. So we kind of had to work around that one a little bit as well and say, okay, well, maybe we offer some complimentary or some discounted rates to those particular markets to encourage people to come in. Again, coming back to our overall objective, obviously creating a commercially viable event is important, and that long-term sustainability. But one of the key objectives is to promote collaboration and best practice. And if you're putting it out of reach of those markets that are going to benefit from it, so the emerging markets, we're looking to ensure that we get as much representation as possible, so they take the lessons away and take them back and improve the industry in their markets.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's a good way to do it. We do that with APS events. We run events for teachers, and a lot of them are at international schools. And then we'll often have, we'll approach local schools with a sort of hugely discounted price for local schools, especially in events in Asia. We're running an event in Nepal in a couple of months, and there's no money in the local education system, so you have to give it, basically. I mean, we never do it completely free. I don't know what you found. Yeah, we never usually do it completely free, because we found in the past when we do completely free, people just don't turn up, and the huge percentage don't, and we can't plan. So we just say, okay, you've got to pay nominal fee for the catering and for other things, just because then I found if people pay even $10, $20, they'll come, and free is. I don't know. People tend. It's different if someone's flying into an event, they're going to come, But if someone's in country, they'll be like, something else is on. They just won't go,
Yeah, look, it's a great point. I think in any market that you really devalue your product when you give it completely for free, and people have got no commitment. So it's something that we try and do as well.
Now, you mentioned about moving on to other sales, like engaging a sales agencies. Is this the first year you've done it? Because it's something I've thought about, and I'm really curious. Like, how could you go through that process of how it works, and if you've had any success, if you've tried it already?
We tried it on a small scale with an agency last year for literally a couple of weeks, and it wasn't particularly successful. But this is a group that's been recommended to us, who've been hugely successful in selling for another conference, also in the kind of health and well-being sector. And these guys were successful. And part of what they do is they build your database as well. So the way that we're looking at it is that, even if they're not massively successful in selling, we're going to come out of it with a better database that we're going to be able to engage not only across our conference offerings, but in terms of other areas as well. So part of their brief is to take our database and market to that, but it's also to build on that and get more contacts for us.
And how does that work typically? Do they charge like a success fee? They get a fee for every attendee, or do you typically pay them like a fee, like a fixed fee to run the project?
It's a mix. So there's a monthly retainer, a relatively small monthly retainer, and then there's a commission on registrations that are put in place. And that's we haven't absolutely signed them up yet. We're probably about a week away, and that's where we're kind of haggling at the moment to say, well, if you're so confident of achieving what you're going to achieve, then probably there needs to be some kind of hurdle that you're going to jump over first, so that we're not just investing a bunch of money and we don't get any. What's our guarantee in terms of the money that we're giving you?
Yeah, it's interesting. But definitely keen to see how that works out. I've heard someone else mention that, but it's kind of a new thing, I think. I mean, well, these outsourced sales companies have been around for a while, but typically conferences have done it themselves. They've approached people on LinkedIn and done the marketing and stuff. Interesting. Have you done any kind of online advertising, like buying Facebook ads, buying Google ads?
No, we haven't. I haven't for this. We've really more just relied on the network. Going through my LinkedIn, my Facebook, marketing to those people, and also a lot of work with our partners. We've got some big global players in the industry that are partners of the event. The like of Active. You'd be aware of, probably the biggest, I think, in fact, I'm certain they're the biggest online registration portal in the mass participation industry. MyLapse, which is the biggest timing company, manufacturer of timing equipment in the industry. Yeah. So using their channels is the way that we tend to do that. So, working with partners, where part of the deal is that, they're paying us an element of money, but at the same time, part of their responsibility is to do some marketing for us as well.
Yeah, now with partners, obviously people call it sponsors, exhibitors, different things, but essentially, are you doing the model where they get an exhibition, they get a table or a booth, or just a table to exhibit, and then you promote them along with the event, or do they get to speak and things? How do you work with them in terms of their participation at the event?
Yeah, there's a great question. There's a number of different ways, depending on what their level of investment is, and I'm not a kind of a one-size-fits-all gold, silver, bronze package person. It's very much about, let's understand what your objectives are, what are you trying to achieve, and then we'll customize something to help you achieve those. But typically there is an expo booth in it. There's some delegate passes involved in it. There's there's opportunities for distribution of content. The speaking one is one that I'm very, very careful of, because it's you then in a position where you're selling your soul to a speaker that comes in and then does a commercial pitch, and your content gets eroded as a result of that. No one wants to go to a conference and be sold to from the stage. They want to come and learn and hear. So it's something that we're very particular with, and there are the odd ones that what they're doing makes sense to be part of the conference, and we work with them, and it's people that we've had long relationships with, and we know that they're going to do the right thing by us. We've also initiated last year, which was hugely successful, an innovation showcase. So we allocated an hour of the program, and we had 5 companies had the option, and they paid for the rights to do literally a 10-minute sales pitch. That was so well received that that's the reason for expanding out into a third day. And in fact, the third day is fundamentally a half day. On the morning of the third day will be our innovation showcase, and that will be a mix of keynotes. We've got the general manager of the Global Sports Innovation Center in Madrid, which is a partnership with Microsoft, who's going to come out and give a keynote. We'll have a couple of panels, and then we'll have about 2 hours worth of showcasing, which is the opportunity for 10 to 12 people to pitch their innovation to the audience. That obviously generates a revenue stream for us, and sometimes that's a sponsor opportunity. So depending on their package, they get that as part of their sponsorship. But the hope is that in time to come, that Mass Participation World will be recognized as a platform where innovators within the industry come and showcase their innovations. We have investors in the room, and we hope in 3 or 4 years' time that we're going to be looking back and saying, that innovation that's now a global norm, was kind of found in inverted commas at MPW. And that way you give people the opportunity to give an unashamed pitch rather than put them in your plenary sessions on day 1 and 2 and have them trying to do a commercial sale.
At events I run, more or less, we don't let sponsors speak anymore because we've just been, we used to do it, and same as how you explained it, like they often just, like, even if, I mean, we used to coach them and we'd say, look, it can't be commercial, you've got to be delivering value, and they'll be like, okay. But sometimes they just can't stop themselves, they just can't stop trying to sell because, they've got like, I've got 100 people in the room, like I'm going to sell, and it's, and it just doesn't work out, like I almost never do it, I mean, I can't even think the last time I let a sponsor speak. What we do is we sometimes do demo slams at the end of day 1, which is people come up and show something for 2 minutes, like really quick, like 2-minute things, because our events are focused on Google and technology in schools, So then we'd let them come up and they can do a quick 2-minute, show their best feature kind of thing. But yeah, it's a tough one, because, and the other one is, I'm curious how you handle this is. Sponsors often want the attendee list, and which is a real grey area because you don't want your attendees getting spammed or contacted by them, but that's often what they want. Have you come across that?
Yeah, look, in these days with PDPA or whatever it's called in different parts of the world, it's just you're not allowed to do it. You can't give your database to anyone. So what we tend to do is we'll give an opportunity for certain levels to be able to send a piece of content out to the database. But again, it's done in such a way that it's not a spamming situation, and it's not everyone doing it. And it's what I also tend to do is one of the benefits I provide is an opportunity for personalized introduction. So I will send to select sponsors who are prepared to invest to that level. They'll get a list of the database, literally company and job title, without naming names, so on, obviously without any contact details, and then they get the opportunity to say, okay, for example, they'll get 10 introductions, and I will then make those personalized introductions based on who they've selected.
Sorry, I think there's a delay here. That's why we're talking over each other a little bit. I'm just curious about your database you mentioned. Like, I mean, obviously, I think we call it the email list, same sort of thing. How do you engage, like, generally? Do you have do you send a newsletter weekly, monthly? And I'm curious, like, how does that work, and what sort of open rates, and how big, like, what sort of size is your list?
Yeah, we've got several thousand on it, and to be honest, it's an area that we need to improve on. It's not. We don't do a newsletter. We really just generally send out content around, and we try to segregate that content depending on what sector of the industry they come from. So rather than a kind of a one size fits all, if they're a supplier, they get a more tailored approach. If they're a rights holder, they get a more tailored approach. If they're a sponsor, they get a more tailored approach. So we've got 4 different personas, so to speak, that we send more tailored messages to.
Yeah.
Yeah. The newsletter thing, you get mixed responses. Some people swear by them. Other people tell you that, your open rates are just getting lower and lower. And, and I see it myself. I subscribe to so many things, and, how often do I get a chance to really read them? So I'm just not convinced that it's worth the time that you put into it. And we tend to just put that content more out on our social channels.
Yeah, definitely. And on the social channels, which one or ones have you had the most success with? Like, if you were going to do 80-20, like, what was the best?
Look, I think LinkedIn works very much in our industry, and to a degree Facebook, but certainly we focus most of the energy on LinkedIn.
Right. Great. So what about dealing with speakers, like presenting speakers? Like, how obviously it's always tough to know how many you need to get. Did you pay your speakers from day one, or did you get some people to speak for free because they wanted to be in front of the audience? Like, how did that work logistically for you? Yeah,
we don't pay any speakers. That's our rule, is that we haven't paid any speakers, and that's the plan. The way I see it is that and it's a kind of an interesting one, because me as a professional speaker then telling speakers that that we're not paying them. But fundamentally, when I'm speaking as a professional speaker, I'm more speaking in corporate circles and that sort of stuff. But when it's industry related, I don't get paid to do that. Occasionally there's flights and so on. And again, we're not operating on massive budgets, so we might pay one, maybe two flights if they're a real keynote that's going to create some attraction for us. Then we might pay flights and a couple of nights accommodation. Or a night's accommodation. But in the main, the way I look at it is that, this is fast becoming recognized as the place to be in the mass participation industry. So, we're giving them the platform to be able, and we're getting more and more speakers approaching us saying we'd love to speak. So that they see that as the platform. And, even last year, as I think I said, we had 60 speakers. Which is obviously a significant amount of speakers to manage and the like. And if you're suddenly starting to offer flights and accommodation, and that, they obviously get a free pass. So it's, that they're getting some value anyway from that perspective. And there's real costs to us associated with that in terms of, the meals that they have. And we host a speaker and sponsor cocktail party on the Sunday evening. So there's real investment and cost for us. And hopefully there's great value from their perspective, and that's certainly the feedback that we get from them, is that it's well worth their while coming and being part of it.
Yeah, definitely. That last thing you mentioned, the speaker and sponsor party, is great because sponsors love it. They get to meet the speakers, and it's something. It's a way, it's another real benefit you're giving to someone, because obviously, I think we pay some speakers, but it all depends. I mean, when you've got an event to the stage you have, when it's an industry event that people want to be seen at because they get value from it, then you often don't have to, which is obviously the way, the best way to have it. Look, Chris, I want to end.
Yeah, you don't pay your speakers?
Oh, sorry. I was we're talking over each other. Yeah, we do sometimes, because we run Google events, and a lot of our presenters are teachers, and if they're coming to present. We'll pay some of the main ones. Most people we don't pay, actually. Most people present for free, but we do pay the main ones. But it depends. Like in the beginning, we didn't pay anyone. We just couldn't afford it. There was no money to pay anyone. Now we do, but it's a tough one, because if you're paying some but not others, and people can be unhappy about it from that point. So I think that your model of kind of it's all or nothing is probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, look, that's certainly, what we're very conscious of, is you pay one and then inevitably someone else hears and it becomes a problem.
Yeah. Look, Chris, I want to end it there. It's really a pleasure to talk to you again. That was a load of good value about running an event, and everyone should check out Mass Participation World. It looks like a really interesting event coming up in Singapore. So, Chris, thanks very much for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Dan. Great talking. Fantastic. Really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Do you want to sell more tickets to your amazing events? EventsFrame event ticketing has been built to minimize the amount of time it takes to buy a ticket. Result? You sell more tickets. Check out eventsframe.com.